If you ask a guitar player to name one of their favourite guitar parts, the chances of them mentioning Wonderwall by Oasis might seem pretty slim. It seems that in our rush to sneer at it for being easy to reproduce, we overlook something a little bit more fundamental, and that's how good it sounds. And even though culturally we seem to have decided that the word basic is a withering insult, there's still a lot we can learn from the power of simplicity. And also, let's not forget that this song alone made Noel Gallagher a millionaire several times over, so it might be worth trying to imitate a little bit of the magic ourselves. So let's look at some of the details that really make this part work. So, Wonderwall, as everyone already knows, goes like this. And there are three aspects to this part that I think are worthy of a bit of attention. First one, and probably the most screamingly obvious, is it uses a capo, or capo if you're that way inclined. And it might seem a little bit of an obvious thing to sing the praises of this, but I'm going to do it anyway, because you still encounter every now and then the attitude that a capo is in some sense cheating, because it's a very simple way of changing key. You don't have to know any theory or anything. You just put it on the neck and play the same chord shapes higher up, and then you've changed key. But there is a lot more to it than that. Worth remembering that the guitar, as with any stringed instrument, you're really at the mercy of the way it is tuned. If you play a certain chord shape, it's always going to ring a certain way. And those chord shapes can take on a very different characteristic if you play them elsewhere on the neck. So a really obvious point of comparison that everyone's probably already tried. If we play the exact same thing without the capo, it's fine and we can hear it's the same tune, but it definitely loses some of that sparkle, some of that inherent characteristic that it has. So it's a really nice way of injecting a little bit of new life into some familiar chord shapes. And the simple practical fact of the matter is, that first chord, which is an F sharp minor 7, you simply couldn't play that voicing of that chord without a capo. So it's a really useful way to give you some ideas for some parts that you wouldn't come up with otherwise. For my particular example here, I'm going to go up a semitone. If we went down a semitone and played these exact same chords, we'd have Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day. But I'm going to go up a semitone and do something with it here. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's look at some of the other aspects of this part. Now, the second element of this part that I think is worthy of a little bit of discussion is a technique called voice leading. Now, this is where certain notes are sustained through a chord progression to facilitate the changes. It makes them sound smoother. And what's going on here, one of the most notorious elements of this part, is that you're just leaving these two fingers on the top two strings throughout. And whilst that might be seen by some as an overly simplistic thing to do, it really adds some interesting harmonic content to the chord progression. What you're doing there is you're holding down the E note and the A note, both of which are in the key of F sharp minor, which the song is in. And what you're doing chord-wise, fundamentally, is you're moving between an F sharp minor, an A, an E, and a B7. But with those chords held throughout the progression, we end up with something a little bit more sophisticated sounding. We end up with F sharp minor 7, A, E sus 4, and B7 sus 4. And it gives the effect of this very haunting kind of high drone running through it. So the way I'm going to imitate that in my example, up at the 3rd fret, I'm going to do something pretty similar. I'm going to move between some pretty obvious chord shapes. I'll borrow the first chord change, E minor to a G shape, and then a C shape going to a D shape. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to go for an even easier option. I'm just going to leave these top 2 strings open and have those running through the whole progression. So I'll play the E minor shape like that. It's actually a G minor chord because of the capo, but you know what I mean. E minor shape like that, then the G shape, then the C shape, leaving those top 2 open, and then instead of playing the D like that, I'm going to shift that C shape up 2 frets and play it like that. So we can maintain those open strings throughout the whole thing. So it undeniably makes it easier to play because you're not having to do anywhere near as much work. But musically, it's really, really effective. Not something to be underrated there. Really makes the chord changes sound smooth and fluent. Okay, so one other detail I'd like to go over today is the strumming pattern. And a key feature of this strumming pattern is that it's moving in a semiquaver rhythm. That is to say, 4 strums every beat. If you're an American, you would call these 16th notes because you're a delightfully literal people. You can fit 16 of them in a bar, so you call them 16th notes. But I'm going to call them semiquavers if it's all the same to you. And although you're not actually hitting the strings every single semiquaver beat, to play it effectively, you want to be moving in that rhythm constantly throughout. And you end up with a part that's not a million miles from a funk part, actually. And if you listen to, for example, Daft Punk's Get Lucky, you will hear nearly, though not exactly the same chord progression being played very much in that style. So let's see, for my thing here up in G minor with the capo at the 3rd fret, I'm just going to mimic that general kind of emotion to give it that sort of catchy momentum. Something like that. So I think we've begged, stolen, borrowed enough elements of this. Let's see what we can put together. Okay, so we've got a few ideas then. Let's see what we can layer up here. So we'll start with that main strumming part. I'll then add a little bit of a bass line. Maybe a bit of percussion next. Something subtle up the top end, just give it a little bit of a lift. And then maybe a kind of a Noel Gallagher style picking over the top. quick disclaimer, there are of course many other aspects to writing a song, like lyrics, melody, structure, arrangement, but I think we've got a passable starting point for something there, built off of some pretty simple ingredients. So there we go. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of an idea of how you can implement your influences into your own music. Really hope you enjoyed that. If so, please consider liking and subscribing. And if there's any other songs you'd like to see me do something similar with, then please let me know in the comments. But thanks ever so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.